Hi, I'm Sally-Shakti and I'm here with Adam Powell. And we're going to talk a little bit about last night's Writing and Thriving workshop at Osho Leela. Adam was one of the participants, and myself and Navneeta were running the workshop, co-creating and collaborating with some plans, and as we went along. Adam, you said to me earlier today, I'm gonna turn a little bit so that I can face you, and we'll start with some conversation. You said to me earlier today that you learned to write at a very young age, and I think that you have quite a good relationship with writing, quite a confident relationship with writing. I'll ask you to talk about that in a second. And you mentioned that you'd never experienced writing as a meditative practice before yesterday's workshop. So could you say a little bit about your relationship with writing and how that was for you?
Yeah, happily.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is nice. What surprised me when I did the workshop was I'd never actually paused before writing and almost looked at what I was doing, because since primary school before, it was so drilled into me, how the process of writing. And yeah, I remember we just paused and we put the pen on the paper. We spent some time, I spent some time just doodling with it. And that was actually the first time last night that I've gone into a meditative state of mind with a pen in my hand. Because usually holding a pen and having a piece of paper meant one very particular mode, one very particular way of being. So it was the first time I'd actually tried doing something entirely different in that space, because as you guided us through into that.
Now, how did that feel for you?
Yeah, I got a very interesting insight, which was I noticed, because when I'm kind of being meditative, I'm more aware of how I'm feeling. And I noticed that when I was feeling intense things come up, anger or fear, or even just a little bit, my handwriting would go kind of jagged.
Yeah.
And I've noticed in my journaling that my handwriting changes depending on how I am. But this was very transparent. When I was at all agitated, I was drawing a straight line. Whereas whenever I relaxed, then I was kind of more spiraling, more free.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was impressed actually.
And you noticed yourself moving through those different emotions whilst you were with that practice?
Well, yeah, the practice was almost like a mirror, and I was just, and then because I was meditating, the kind of movie was what's going on inside me, and then it was translating into what my hand did, almost like a pendulum.
Yeah, or like I don't know if this is the right word,
like
but I'm going to say pictograph or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to complete on this, I think you've really said a lot. You mentioned primary school, and you mentioned that well, in my words, you've been conditioned to write in a certain way. What typically does writing mean for you, and how what's your relationship with that? What are your emotions around that?
Well, if it's not giving anything away, you asked us to have 3 words at the start of the workshop, and mine were proud, excited, and intimidated.
Yeah.
And I feel I'm fortunate because I haven't had any dyslexia or things like this. I've always been very comfortable in the kind of general groove of writing being the way I do an exam or the way I communicate. And and because of I've taken that to some high levels, so I feel proud, I feel excited, I feel proud about my capability to write, and then I feel excited because there's stuff I want to do with it. Like I've got this website, and I'm trying to write like utopian ideas for the kind of world that I'd like to see, and I'm excited to write that sort of stuff, but also intimidated because it's daunting. And I think you just asked me about like my relationship with writing, and I feel capable, but also it comes with a sense of pressure.
Yeah.
Because traditionally my writing has always been to perform, to meet some standard, hit the mark scheme, and so on. I feel like the weight of my public schooling and all the pressure on me to be exemplary is also kind of there, slightly present when I'm writing.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You brought so many things into this conversation by sharing that. I really appreciate that. I think you and I are both in a similar position, have a similar relationship with writing. People know, and I share this. I didn't go to public school. Had a working class upbringing, but I always had a particular talent for writing and reading. Was very advanced for my age, and have now gone on to, achieve high achievements with my writing, much higher than many other people I know who had a very similar working class upbringing. I did my degree, became an English teacher, then went back to do a master's in creative writing and a PhD. Now I run my own writing business. So I have this, I think you and I this is what I felt to say. You and I have typically a very affirmative relationship with writing. We have been judged to be good because of the standard and the quality of our writing. And that puts us in a particular privileged position in this context. It also does bring up particular pressures, as you mentioned, the pressure to perform, the pressure to achieve. I felt under quite intense pressure as I progressed through academia, because I didn't always have the right vocabulary. I certainly didn't have the right accent when I was speaking. My writing often can belie my working class upbringing, because my writing almost comes from a different identity. I can write very differently, and that's an aspect that I explored in my PhD. How writing, in order to conform, many people's experience with writing is that in order to conform to the standard, our particularity, subjectivity, and identity becomes pushed aside and marginalized in order to conform to the standard of writing. You and I obviously both have quite an affirmative relationship with writing, where we've been judged to be good at that, with its attendant pressures as well. But I'm very also acutely aware, as having been an English teacher for 10 years and working with people in the way that I do with writing, and working with myself, my own body, my own somatic inquiry, the traumatic experience that I journaled through when I completed my PhD and my own practice, that there is a lot of what I call writing trauma. And this, I believe, is conditioned through education and socialization. So that relationship with writing, where it's a form of judgment, it's a form of evaluation, it's a form of giving value to yourself as a person, because you got it right, you did well, and then you got affirmed for that. That has its own pressures, and for the individual as well, but there are also then many people who are excluded from that type of affirmation and self-validation, and that starts at a very, very young age. And for myself, though I went on to, I now have a PhD, at 11, when I took my 11 plus and failed and didn't go to a grammar school, that kind of pressure is devastating in the formulation of a personality, formulation of a life. And many people experience that trauma. Something that I really like to be present with, and working in collaboration with Navanita in the workshop. Navanita's what Navanita brings to the session is a particular form of therapeutic writing practice, which actually supported a lot of people to be with that trauma through somatic inquiry and through writing inquiry in the workshop. Just wanted to kind of, bring that in response to what you're saying, because even for the two of us who have had a very positive relationship with writing, there are pressures, there's intimidation. The more writing, in a way, I think almost always feels exposing and vulnerable. We reach into some very deep places and expose that. And once we get the words onto the page, it's like, you know, there's this pressure of being seen and being judged. And in a way that doesn't go away, how, you know, wherever you are with your writing, but also that there are practices that we can use and work with to support us with that process.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I'm just nodding on.
Yeah, once I start talking about writing, that's the conversation.
That's great.
Thank you for giving me space to say that. Yeah,
no, my pleasure.
So yeah, and how are you feeling? I
want to take the opportunity to sort of big up journaling, because one of the things that I liked was Napanita said last night that she was journaling through hard times, and it was a real lifeline for her. And one of the big events over the last few years for me was I went backpacking, and my parents very kindly got me a journal as a gift. And from the day one, being able to write in that journal was a lifeline. It was like it was a conversation or a trusted friend I could always communicate with. And initially, I remember it seemed a little bit arbitrary or forced because it wasn't a person. But I want to, in this space, talking about writing, I really want to champion journaling as being both a support. I found it a support, and also I found it a really good tool for understanding myself a bit better, because I see what I'm preoccupied with, or even see in my handwriting.
Yeah. So journaling, thank you for bringing that in. Journaling for me is a great place to meet yourself. The page is always a profound place to meet yourself. I journaled non-stop for 3 months, literally like 3 months solid after I finished my PhD, to move through the trauma that had accumulated in me from my PhD process and from writing my PhD, and from what I was uncovering, the traumas I was uncovering in myself in that process. You know, any kind of project like that is very profound. So journaling was, again, for me, where I could meet myself, you know, reflected on the page, and observe my habitual patterns and behaviors. And in my experience, and the way that I explain this to people, is that what that also enabled me to do over time, because that was like a full-time practice for quite a significant period of time. It also enabled me to move some of those habitual behaviors and patterns out of my body, out of my energy field, and onto the page, so I could let them go. And that's also very powerful. So just witnessing what's there, you know, in the free writing and in the journaling, we always encourage writing without editing, writing without censorship. So that letting go of the self-judgment, observing, witnessing what's there, and allowing it to be present, and putting it down on the page, you know, without shame, without judgment, without guilt, can be very powerfully healing and supportive, you know, and as a practice and as a process, but also, as you said, as a conversation with yourself, just being present. Sometimes journaling actually is better than another person, or at least different than another person, because another way that I use journaling is, you know, when I can get into an energy of just over talking, and another person's going to just keep receiving that, and it's overwhelming. So then, okay, I can put that onto the page instead, you know, and I'm not using another person's energy to do that. I'm moving it through myself. So yeah, I think there are a lot of benefits to journaling. And the last thing about journaling I'll mention is that through my practice that I developed, I mentioned this last night, you know, I stopped. Oh God, there's so many things I could say, but I stopped the need, let go of the need for it to be legible. You know, there were, and I've published these and I've shown them. There are huge sections of my journaling where I don't even take the pen off the page. So it started, it was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to worry about that spelling. And then it was like, you know, and then eventually, like, the words all just became like one big long, you know, and it's like, I am writing words because I know what I'm, you know, the words are coming out as I'm writing them, but it's not legible anymore. And there's no, for me in journaling of that kind, there's no need for it to be legible. I'm not writing a diary or a record that I'm going to go back to or publish. It's not a public piece of writing. It's not even something I used to keep. I've, you know, obviously got books and books of journals, and I used to keep journals and think that I was going to read them again one day. I never do, right? So I was like, it doesn't need to even be readable. Okay. I'm just want to get the energy out. I'll write in different ways for different purposes. But when I'm doing that kind of journaling, I just want to let the energy move through me. So yeah, thanks for bringing that.
I do sometimes go back in my journals.
Yeah, it's good to do that too.
Like, what did I do this time last year, or 2 years ago, or 3 years ago?
And anytime I reread that, you know, I meet myself somewhere and see where I am in relation to that now, or, you know, remember a reminder. It's, you know, it's good to have that versatility of practice. The other aspect that I talk about a lot in any writing sessions is letting go of that critical part of the brain. And this is something that, you know, I think you and I probably have in common. I talk to doctoral researchers, PhD students about this a lot, because I support them to write their thesis. And I say, you know, to be in that position where you're doing a PhD, one of your strongest attributes is most likely a highly developed critical analytical faculty of the brain. And that's great. That is like your strongest strength as a, you know, as a researcher. It's also your biggest weakness as a writer, because it's going to be the bit that stops you writing before you've even got started. It's the bit that says, oh no, that's not good enough. Oh, not that word. Oh, well, when I read the article about this yesterday, they said it much better than I did. And that part of the brain, when we turn it on ourselves and we bring it in too soon, that will just crush the creativity and the ability to think critically and imaginatively and bring new ideas and originality into the world, because that part of the brain just wants it to be right. So I always encourage people to free write first, turn off the editor, let the editor go, because we know we're going to bring that part back in, because there's also that fear of, oh, but if I just write a load of rubbish now, like, it's going to be rubbish. You're not going to hand that in. You're not going to show that to anyone, but that's the part where the imagination gets started and you can get your ideas down without crushing them before they're born. Then you can come back to that. If it's something that you want to publish, or it's something that you want to share more publicly, you can come back to that and work with the editor to make it publishable and public. But those two parts of the brain actually in writing don't really work well together. They tend to suppress each other. So if you have a strong critical aspect, it's good to kind of try these practices to tone that down a little bit, so to allow your creative side a bit more freedom when you're writing.
I thought you did it particularly well last night, was getting all of us flowing in the creative writing and sort of stepping out of the mental side of it. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Adam, is there anything more that you'd like to add?
No. Happy and celebrating.
Yay! Thank you. Yeah.